Hey YouTube, welcome to Plan Build Play. In this video I was going to go over how to build a covered carport or patio. Unfortunately the last couple weeks we got about 2 feet of snow and the version I built just collapsed. So I'm going to go over what went well with that version and what didn't, and then go over how I'm going to rebuild this and make a stronger version that can support enough snow. Alright, so here's the version I built a couple years ago. This was from about 5 years ago. As you can tell, it just completely collapsed. So this did use 1-inch tubing, and then all the joints have fittings on them to hold everything together. These were actually bolted together so you can disassemble it pretty easily. And the same thing with the center pieces, where there's a joint in the center, and then over to the other side. Unfortunately, with 2 feet of snow, the tubing just buckled and bent. So you can tell this was a straight piece, and all the roof was angled up. And same with all the side supports. And these all just collapsed. So just for reference, how much snow we got. A week ago we got about a foot, and then none of it melted, and we got another foot just a couple days ago. So I don't know if you can tell, but that's at least 24 inches of snow. With some spots drifting up to like 4 feet. With all that weight on the roof, it just collapsed. Okay, so when rebuilding this patio cover, I'm actually going to have to replace the concrete blocks as well, since I'm using much larger tubing this time. So originally I used 1-inch tubing with 1¼ inch fittings. This is only a 1/16 inch thick. Now I'm going up to 2-inch tubing and 2½ inch fittings. These are 1/8 inch thick. So since I can't use the original fittings, I'm going to have to build some new ones. These actually get cast into the concrete blocks to hold everything in place. Okay, so to set up these blocks, I have a fitting already pre-set up. This is just a piece of 2½ inch tubing with a flat plate on the bottom to hold it into the concrete. And then this is just for a carry handle, or you can also use it to tie down your tarps or whatever your top is made of. And then I have the mold already set up. When you build these, just make sure you have your supports on the outside, so this way I can actually take it apart after there's a concrete poured in there. I have a drill as well as a drywall mud mixer. Just make sure you have a high enough power drill to handle mixing the concrete. Anything smaller than, well, this one's a 8-amp drill, it might actually burn out. Some 2-liter bottles to measure my water, and then the concrete mix. So these blocks will actually use about 1 bag per brick. And then I'll be mixing it with a wheelbarrow and shovel. I'll be doing this inside too, so I'm going to be using a respirator. Concrete dust is a hazard to your health, so you don't want to be breathing that. Okay, so a couple things to note for mixing concrete. Adding too much water actually weakens the concrete slightly, and adding small amounts will change the consistency quite a bit. I added a little bit more than the recommended amount, just so it's easier to pour into the mold. But I usually start with a little bit less than they recommend and then add it until I get the consistency I want. So I have the first one done already. That's about 6 inches into the concrete, with just the top and the handle sticking out. To measure how deep it is, I just stuck this metal bar in there And I have a couple lines on the bottom. So that's about 6 inches right there at that first mark. And then just set my fitting in there. Just make sure it's level. Make sure you get all the air bubbles out as well. Otherwise you'll have a hole in the concrete block when you're done. So just set that in, fill it up with the rest of the concrete, and then level off the top like I did with the first one. Okay, so while I'm waiting for the concrete to cure, I've started cutting my tubing. I'm using 24-foot lengths and using my bandsaw over here to cut it. This saved a ton of time, especially with the amount of pieces I need for both the fittings as well as the tubing. So the dimensions I'm using for this are going to be a 7-foot height. That gives me a total of 8 feet here with the concrete blocks. And then in the center it goes up to 10 feet. And that is using a 6-foot length from here, or 6 feet 4 inches from here to here. And then that spans between my fence and in the workshop. This also fits really well in a 24-foot tubing. So the only scrap so far I have are these little pieces at the end of a tube. That's out of a few hundred feet of tubing so far. After that, I've also started drilling all the holes where the fittings are going to bolt into the tubes, and then started painting them as well. So it's been 5 days since I've poured these concrete blocks, and now they're ready to take out of the molds. The way I set up my molds, I just had to take off this one panel, and the whole block will slide right out. And here's the finished product. Now I have most of the parts for the fittings cut, and I have these ready to start welding together. These 3 are for the very start of the patio. This way it has a flat end on the bottom, so you can actually have this right against another wall or a tarp. And these go down to your posts, down to the ground. Then these go up to the roof. Then there's a ridgeline tube as well. And then back to the other side, and back down to the ground. So when I'm setting these up, I did one to start with, just to check all the angles. I'm using a 30-degree angle on the roof, just to drain some water away for rain. And then also to speed up the cutting in these, I'm doing them in batches after I got the first one set up, just to make sure I have everything set how I want it to. So after that, I just cut them to length, and then mark the center of it, and then you can actually cut both angles if you're fitting at the same time. And then these actually use the same angle for both the roof fitting as well as the one going down to the post. So now I just have to weld these together, paint it, and they are ready to assemble. Okay, so I finally finished all of my fittings and painted them. I did make one change here. Instead of 30 degrees, I went down to 20 degrees for the roof. This fit my tarp a little bit better, since I'm trying to match an existing setup. Also, one thing to watch for is make sure you account for your overlap. Here I had to make a change to the bolt distance to the edge, since I didn't measure that correctly. I will also put a link to a triangle calculator in the description of the video. This will help you figure out if you have a certain distance from the 2 posts and you have a set angle. It'll give you the measurements for your roof. Here is the next set of fittings. These are the same measurements and setups as the first set for the angles. The only difference is they have a longer center tube, and this way it can actually connect 2 different tubes. So that way you can assemble it in sections and take it apart easier. So here you'll have one tube going into this side, you'll bolt it here, and then on the other side you'll have one coming in from the other side, and you bolt it here. This may not make a lot of sense just looking at the fittings, and I'll show how this goes together in a minute. And here's how everything looks when it gets assembled. So far I only have 4 sections done. These are each 5-foot lengths. I have a couple more to finish where it collapsed over there. I've been doing these just one at a time, and I've been keeping the tarp in place. If you're building this as a new setup, then that's obviously not an issue, but it just makes putting this together easier, doing it in smaller sections. So for the fittings, you can see here's the end piece over here. There's the corner fittings where the post comes down, goes up right next to a tree, and then back down the other side. And there's the concrete blocks everything gets bolted to. The next fittings are the center ones, and this section goes from here to here, so it's a 5-foot bar across, and then these two get slid on from the ends and then bolted in place. Same thing happens in the center. They all look the same from here, but this one has a post going to it, then you have 2 center ones, and then this one has a post coming down as well. And then if you go over from there, you get the other post coming down. And then from there you have the other posts. From there you have the other posts, which is right here, and this connects the 2 5-foot bars coming across. So here's a 5-foot section, and then the other 5-foot section, and then they get bolted together inside that fitting. And then the same thing happens in the roof one, except that I'm missing a bolt. So a couple more sections to go, and this will be ready to start using again.